Hello and welcome to the trade setup. In this video, we are looking at Energy Fuels. It is time for another update. And today we will be focusing specifically on the smaller time frame. So if you want the full context, I highly encourage you to watch the previous video because it contains extremely important information for the context of this chart. If you have already watched it, nothing has really changed from the larger time frame. We are only building upon what we have already shown previously, where the setup we provided has succeeded in following through. One thing I will provide you, besides the smaller time frame today, however, is the reminder of the ideal target for the larger structure, at least for the ABC pattern, which is the likely portion of this overall uptrend. If you remember, we haven't been much of a fan of the idea of the wave 5 being in place. We would have been accepting of it if we were to break internal levels of support we have been tracking down to $14.5, but this hasn't happened yet, and in fact I believe this is the time to start the reversal. This is the time, or soon will be the time, to start the extension to new highs, where the ideal target for the wave C is still the 100% extension of a wave A, and this sits at $46.5. Sure, it is an ideal target. It doesn't need to get there, but I wouldn't be surprised if it does, and I am looking to capture this value. In the smaller time frame, I have been looking for a few scenarios, but primarily we have been tracking either a leading diagonal to be in formation here, where most recently we would have expected a wave 5 to take place within the area of an ABC structure, and since within the wave A we have identified a 5-wave pattern, we deemed a high probability area of support to track internally for a wave B and take us afterwards in continuation to higher prices within a wave C. Then there is the scenario where this would have been a wave 4 in a triangle, where we would have just bottomed, possibly, we don't actually have to, but we would have these trend lines that have most recently been broken, and we would either have to see the breakout occur in this area of a triangle, or assume that this wave D would have formed a reset, which I'm not too much of a fan of, to be honest, at least not of the idea of a top being in place just yet. I would at least like to form one more high if this is to be the case. So I have actually drawn this channel yesterday where within a wave 5, I wouldn't have found it uncommon to top within this upper boundary region, which seems to be the case. But unfortunately, I do not believe this has been an actual wave C. Within a wave C, I would have expected to build a 5-wave pattern. This is not the case here. In fact, I quite clearly can tell we have built a 3-wave pattern in this area, and we have done a throw over. This is rather telling me that the white count, at the very least, might be forming an extension where the wave 3 wouldn't have actually topped here, but would still be ongoing. This wave 4 would be yet to come, and I would be extending this overall expectation. I wanted to be mindful though, because even though this could build a larger leading diagonal, once we build, instead of a 3-wave pattern in this area, a 5-wave pattern within the area of a wave C, we would also be able just as well to track this as a larger ABC structure, which could be our wave D top, which could be just a 3-wave move to the upside, where we could see an entire wave 4 reset. So there is substantial risk, but especially after we complete this as a wave C to the upside, and until that actually happens, I might even prefer that we actually extend still to higher prices. Then, in the blue interpretation, I would likely have the same count as within the white wave C, but instead of building an ending diagonal in the wave C of the wave 3, I would still have the D wave top here. This would have still been the wave E bottom, and this would be building, a leading diagonal, a wave 1 to the upside instead, where afterwards I can actually look for a 1-2 setup. This, if it manages to follow through, will actually be a valid setup where, once again, I will end up having extremely similar levels of support for a wave 2 in blue, or a wave 4 in white. So we might not have the most reliable large time frame structure, but in terms of these interpretations that would lead to higher prices, we would have some confluence. Now, in this scenario, I actually need to now assume that this wave 1 to the upside might have actually worked out as a 3-wave pattern. I know, doesn't look too clear, but I would be able to look for the ideal target of the wave 3, and I can notice very nicely how we pushed perfectly into that level before getting rejected in what is already a quite substantial correction. And to be clear, all of this is caused by the fact that within this wave 3 to the upside, we have failed to create an impulse. I can still track the same levels of support regardless. I would even add a different count for white, but it would be literally the same count I would be tracking in blue. So for the purposes of this video, for the purposes of this explanation, we will continue to track this development in blue. So I would now expect a wave 4 to be taking place. This would be my primary interpretation, and of course there are always many other options, but I am now watching for a wave 4 correction into the area of support with the levels between $24.5 down to $22.5. As long as this area still holds, I believe we can still look for one additional high, and if you ask me, I would generally like for the wave 4 to enter the territory of the wave 1, which would be quite deep into the support zone in this case, and it is also typically expected to form similar proportions within the wave 4 with what we had in this as a wave 2. So I would expect it to likely go on for a little longer. If we are to see a more direct breakout, I would likely have to consider that this would have built instead a series of 1-2 setups or something like this, but it's already getting extremely deep into the support levels we would be able to track for such an interpretation, and I generally find it a quite weak scenario, because if we were to build such a strong wave 3 to the upside, I believe most likely we wouldn't have retraced this deep in the first place. And for now, we can take a brief look at the internal structure within this correction, where I actually can identify something like an A, B, C pattern, where within the wave C, I might prefer probably 2 additional lows, right? A wave 5 down here, a wave 4, and another wave 5. Something like that would allow me to consider an A, B, C structure complete, although it might not necessarily complete the entire correction, and of course, even here, actually especially here, distortions are quite common, and there would be plenty of options on how this structure could actually unfold. We won't go beyond this. Primarily, once again, I expect a wave 3 to be in place within this movement to the upside, since once again we have failed to build an impulse. I would like a wave 4 and a wave 5, and this would be in confluence within 3 different scenarios. Either the leading diagonal in blue, where we would have formed the bottom of the triangle here. This would be a larger 5-wave pattern in a wave 1 to the upside. The wave C in white, where this would be completing a larger wave 3. And the interpretation where I would track just a larger A, B, C structure here, possibly still part of a triangle potentially, possibly just part of a larger A, B, C structure here that would ultimately take us to significantly lower prices. So the way I see it, the risk is substantial if we get a sustained break below the 61.8% retracement. I'm not saying it's impossible for this structure to still succeed in pushing to higher prices, but again, the risk is substantial, and that's it. So for now, I would be watching maybe some resistance levels up to the 78.6% retracement for a potential larger A, B, C pattern. And let's actually track this in orange, where again, we might get a reset of the triangle, we might get a reset of the entire correction in this area. Cannot tell at this point, but for me, quite clearly, the 61.8% retracement in blue is extremely important. And beyond that, I suppose in the interpretation of an extended triangle, we could adjust these trend lines, but I don't want to add an additional count even for that, especially as long as we are holding this blue support zone. And for now, we will stop here. If you enjoy this content and if you want to work with me on these opportunities, on these setups, send me an email. The address will show up on the screen right now. And for now, these are the levels, this is the trade setup. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and if you enjoyed the content and want to support it directly, check out the channel membership, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.